Are you ready? The Cornelia Stephanie Show, Wake Up to Love, your call to action. Join Cornelia as she empowers others to live heaven on earth. Cornelia teaches listeners how to be the authority over yourself, embracing your inner guru. Feel yourself uplifted into limitless expansion, integrating ease and grace in a changing world. This show will cover topics such as unconditional love, your physical body, how to be in extraordinary relationships, create financial and emotional wealth, embracing entrepreneurship in the new earth. All right, welcome to the Cornelia Stephanie Show, everyone. I'm so excited and honored that you're here with us today. We're going to have a topic discussion, a roundtable discussion, a panel discussion on a topic that I feel is really important for all of us to embrace, and that is grieving. Grieving the losses of whatever it is that we're faced with in the world today. And there's a lot of people that are experiencing deep, deep grief. And sometimes that grief is not necessarily even something from the present moment, but it's also something from the past that is really bringing up those feelings of stored grief that has been held in the physical body for a long time. So I wanted to bring you again the world's best leading influencers and practitioners, which, by the way, you can have access to these incredible people that you're going to hear from today in our app, in your app, the KS Media Group app. Go to your Apple Store, go to your Play Store, download the app, create your free account so you have all access to everything that is there. There's podcasts, there's articles, there is all kinds of ways that you can feel supported to live your best life. We've recently rolled out a new experience, which is called the Beloved 7-Day, and it is featured on the homepage of the app. 10-minute sessions with the world's best to help you live your best life. And it's all free, it's all there to support you. So grieving is a big part of being alive today. You know, we are grieving a lot of loss, a lot of things that cause us pain. And I find that many people have held back from really diving into their grief or trying to numb up their grief because it's too much. It's too much for them. And so, you know, it's just too much to feel. It's just, there's too much. So I wanted to have a roundtable discussion around that so that you can hear from these incredible practitioners, coaches, healers that have dealt with grief in their life and are able to share through their own story, through their own experience of how they dealt with grief and how they moved on. So, Chili, I'm just going to go right to you and I'm going to bring you in. And so tell us about how you've like a story of grief, what you've done, how you've dealt with it, and let us hear about it.
Absolutely. So for me, September happens to be Death Month. I have nicknamed it Death Month. The reason I've nicknamed it Death Month is because it's kind of letting the people around me know that I've got a lot of grief going on. I have September 11th stuff. I have survivor grief and guilt from that. I lost my beloved grandmother on September 18th, 2015. She was 92 years old. And I want to say that even though, I mean, she was 92 and she was in perfect health, but she was starting to have issues because age. And I remember so vividly getting the phone call. I got a text message first saying, Grandma just passed away, surrounded by her children. She had 5 children, including my mother. And I was in a restaurant in Vermont, and I was waiting for my credit card back, and I could not get out of that restaurant quickly enough. And I got into my car and I just sobbed. I sobbed. I couldn't breathe. I just sobbed. And I remember thinking, I've been waiting for this shoe to drop since 2006. Why is 2006 important? September 28th, 2006, my grandfather died of myasthenia gravis. And
Of what?
myasthenia gravis, it's a muscular disease. And basically is like, he was perfectly there, in his mind, emotionally, etc. But it degenerates your muscle tissue, and basically makes it so that you can't basically function. He was like 6'2", and he basically was wheelchair bound very briefly, and then in a hospital bed. Luckily for us, in the case study that I've read up on, his deterioration was very fast, because it can be very slow and very painful. And so when my grandma passed away, like you said earlier, it's not just the grief of the moment that you're dealing with. It's the matriarch of our family was gone. My mother was completely shattered. I was in Vermont, not where I live in North Carolina. And no one around me really, like I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I didn't want to numb. I knew enough to know that I was not going to numb. I was racing a Spartan race the next day, which for anybody that's unfamiliar is running up and down a huge mountain in Vermont, at Killington, which most people pay very good money to ski down. We hiked up and down it for about 18 miles worth. And the next morning, of course, everyone was, I'm so sorry for your loss and such and so forth. And I saw it on Facebook, and it was like, how are you even doing this? And I said, well, if I'm going to die on the mountain, I'm going to die on the mountain. The worst case scenario is I die and I see my grandma and my grandpa. And people were like looking at me like, okay, but that's where my headspace was. And it's important when we come into grief spaces, as someone else said, grief is not a pretty topic. And we are terrible as a society. We are horrid at grieving. We just went through the 21st anniversary of September 11th. And so many people have moved on because it's, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. The people who were affected by it directly, who lost a loved one, or the people, like I lost people, I didn't know it until well into 2002, because I didn't put Christmas cards and I was trying to figure it out. And people sent me letters saying, oh, he and she died. Oh my God. Okay. So I have to regrieve. And that part of the thing we don't talk about is the regrief process. So it's not just when someone is in a space of the original trauma. If we don't deal with the original trauma, if we numb it, and so many of us do, because again, our society is horrid at grieving. My mom, I'll just give you an example. My mom is in her 70s, and I'm not throwing my mom under the bus. We've had this conversation, but that's first Thanksgiving without my grandma, because my family, like everybody, went to my grandma's for Thanksgiving. My grandma loved the holidays. And my mom was like, well, I'm supposed to be over it by now. And I, whoa. You will grieve the loss of your beloved mother for the rest of your life. Now, grief doesn't always have to look like sobbing hysterics. Grief can look like, and often does look like, a moment when you hear a song, or for me, like when I see yellow roses. There was a thing between my grandma and my grandpa. I see yellow roses, or like when I go to the state farmers market and I see pussy willows. My grandpa would go and cut my grandma pussy willows every Easter to make an Easter egg tree. Grief looks like me seeing pussy willows and just catching my breath, and sharing with the lady that's selling the pussy willows the story about my grandma. That is what grief can look like. Grief can be very soft. Grief can be hearing a song on the radio and breaking out into a smile because you remember the person who's passed away, and that time that you went to the bar and you just danced to the specific song. And now every time you hear the song, it reminds you of the good times of that person. And I think it's important I know for me, it's important when I feel grief, because I didn't grow up in a household where we honored grief, we honored fear-based emotions. So I don't call them negative emotions. I call them fear-based emotions. I didn't grow up in a household where we did that. I grew up in a household where it was shoulders back, chin up, under the rug. You've had your 48 hours to grieve. We put them in the ground. We're done. And that's not at all how grief works. And like you said, we store emotion in the body, and emotion is just energy in motion. And it can lead us to dis-ease. So if we have arthritis, if we have autoimmune issues, if we have all these other things that no one connects the dots on, and we haven't dealt with it. I dealt with autoimmune issues for 20 some odd years until I started realizing, dude, I've got years of grief and anger and sadness going back to before I was born. Epigenetics, anybody? I mean, this whole thing, it all interrelates to grief. And when we get to a space of we're like, ew, most people, when I tell people that I'm an emotion coach, they go, oh, you've got some stories. I mean, truthfully, I do. But the thing is that I allowed myself this year for the first time to not go into September as heavy. I decided to let September be, you know what, it's death month. And I'm going to let myself be where I am. And it's shifted a little bit. I will be curious. It shifted things a little bit with September 11th. I will be curious in a couple days. In 3 days, when we celebrate the death anniversary of my grandmother, I will be curious as to how I process it, how I am. But yeah, I mean, grief is multifaceted. And if you're in a space where you are feeling like you just want to crawl up and do a ball in the fetal position, sob your eyes out, please do it. Honor that emotion, because here's the thing, when we move it through us, it's like ocean waves. You wouldn't stop in the ocean and be like, oh, not feeling the high tide. You would get crushed. It's going to keep slapping you down, as opposed to allowing yourself to feel it. Because the thing is emotion, the arc of an emotion is 13 minutes. So if we allow ourselves to be like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling sadness. If I let myself feel it, it moves through me instead of sticking to me. And I share that as a very real thing and as a very practical piece, because I feel like a lot of times part of why people won't dive into their emotions, as you said earlier, is because they're terrified, because it's too much. But if I say to somebody, if I tell my clients, for example, go set your egg timer for 13 minutes. Think about the death of so-and-so, or the loss of that job, or September 11th, or something that brings you to tears, and let yourself just feel it. And then when the timer goes off, where are you at? If you're still crying, keep going. And if you're in the space where you're like, oh, the tears are dry, you've gone through a layer of emotion. Congratulations. That's beautiful. That's how we heal and recover.
I've never heard of the egg timer. I actually like that. It's a wonderful tool to use for, the wave, like you said. So I appreciate your story. I appreciate your passion. And we have to remember that we came from a time when we were not allowed to feel. And we came from a time when our emotions were not part of our awareness and our reality. And so
Correct.
now we have to bring that into balance and make sure that we feel to heal.
Yep.
And so that's part of that. So Peggy, I'd like to bring you out and ask you, have you had a story of loss in your life that you have had to face, and how did you deal with that?
Yes, I've actually had, quite a few losses in my life, but the biggest one was losing my husband of 30 years rather unexpectedly. And, I often talk about grief is the price we pay for loving someone. And the deeper the love, the deeper the grief. And like what Jilly said, you never get over the grief. You just adapt to your life and you go on. It's not as painful as time goes on, but the grief is always there. One of the things she talked about was hearing a song or the flowers. In the book that I wrote about it, I call it grief eruptions, because you can think that you're going forward and things are getting better, and all of a sudden something triggers you and it just sets you back. And so it ends up depressing you more because, am I ever going to get through this? I don't think you ever get through it. You just move forward in a different way with your life. And so I have a group of widows that I work with, and I tell them to have an anchor thought, to think about one thing, one memory that they really treasured that was such a happy occasion for them. And every time that grief eruption happens, as soon as it happens, put that thought in its place. And you're going to train your brain so that whenever that grief eruption starts to happen, it's going to look for that anchor thought, and it's not going to be as painful. And I've had some of the ladies in my group tell me that it really did help them, because over time, it wasn't the painful things, it was the happy memory that was filling their mind. So it's a painful thing, and it's such a hard thing to go through, but you do end up having better days. And that's what I, tell my ladies too, that are still raw into the emotion. Things get better, they're just going to get different. And if you can find your message in your mess, you're going to be better for it. I know I was.
I love that. It reminded me of last year when last year was very challenging time for me because I was with two people, two women, one of my clients and also one of my friends, who both of them lost their sons to suicide. And so being the midwife for them during one of the most challenging times of grief that a mother, a woman could ever deal with ever in life is losing a child. Even though I haven't lost a child in this life, but I am a master at emotional processing. So the fact that these situations showed up for me so that I can be in service and support these women with their deepest, darkest grief, this was a really big time in my life. And knowing that, I remember when I went over to my friend's house that day and her whole family, she had a big family. Imagine a whole house full of people and about 15 people, 15 or 20 people that are all there in emotional shock. That is what I walked in to support. And for that next month, then, being with my friend as she was getting up every day to face that same grief, that same loss of her child not being here anymore, and checking in with her. After a while, it also took a toll on me because I also had to make sure that I took a step back and then took care of myself. I remember I was scheduled to go on vacation. I canceled my vacation because I wasn't in a space to go on vacation. I had my own processing to do. And so the grief piece, how we can support each other, like you said, Jilly, like you said, Peggy, with supporting your ladies, with supporting your family, it's an important piece. September is a month of, uh, I remember when September 17th of 1993 was the last time I tried to commit suicide. So when you're talking about that September is a death month, or, I can see that because it is a month of endings and closure, and it's also a 9 in the numerology, and so we also are affected by that as well. Then we move into October and we're beginning again in the 1, in the 10th month. So we're all affected by it, but I know that, Jilly, that you're going to get through this now, and how your perception is going to change now of September, just as my time has also changed of how I view September. There used to be a big, huge shadow every time. I was always afraid coming to feel that time period of the shadow of suicide present. And isn't it interesting how I was in service to two women who lost their sons to suicide when I was walking with the shadow of suicide my entire life until 1993, when that was the last time. So when it comes to grief, grief can also be an opening. It can be an opening to really look at what happens and what's your relationship with God like? What's your relationship with God like? And how do you feel, about your relationship with God and all of that? And what happens when we die? So these are all, grief can help us with that as well. And like you said, Peggy, time, which is an illusion, space, heals those wounds. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we forget, it's just that we move on. And that is just part of life. It's we move on. And having that anchor memory that you talked about, I didn't word it exactly like that, but I had to come up with something for my friend to have in place when waves of emotion would come over her and she would miss her son. What would she do? And so I had to give her something. And I remember it wasn't necessarily the anchor point of what you said, but I came up with something to help her in that way. So this is how we're helping each other grieve the losses that we're facing. And the losses could be anything from a beloved, it could be our dog, it could be a job, it could be a relationship. Sometimes even the loss could be a relationship that you've never had, that you've always wanted. The loss of feeling that you've never had that. And so feeling that. So there's so many layers to grief that I want people not to be so afraid of it. I mean, grief takes time, and it takes time, and it takes your body's presence to be fully present and to really feel what is there to feel, but not to stay in it and become a depressed person for years, but to feel and move on and be around people that are supporting you, because God sure is sending those people on your path. We know that. We know how that works. So Nadine, you're up. Tell us about what you've had to deal with when it's come to grief and loss.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said there, Cornelia. It's very rarely one thing, is it? It's like maybe when you're young, the first experience you have of losing. For me, it was a beloved pet. The first time I remember feeling really sad, it was a dog, the family dog. And it hit me hard. And you go through it with dogs, you go through it again and again. I do anyway, because I keep getting more. But it is that, to me, it builds. There's one time, then there's another time, there's another time. And I feel when I lose somebody or something changes, I feel sadness and grief when things change as well, change in life. But I'm always remembering my past sadness. So it builds. And I think you might have mentioned it, Peggy. I don't know if you said it that way, but time heals. I'd like to argue with that, actually, because yes, we do manage it better, but actually in time, I feel personally it hurts more because there's more loss, there's more. So like my mum, for instance, as the years go on, I miss her more, not less, because I'm getting emotional now, but it is because she's not there. So I know I cry, but I compose myself. I know it's okay to cry, but it is that it builds. So, but we do manage it. I'm not, I used to be very frightened of my emotions. I used to avoid them. I used to numb myself out with things like alcohol and working too hard, that kind of thing, because I couldn't let myself feel it. But now, through the process that I've learned for myself, for my own benefit, I really do. And you say it all the time, don't you, Cornelia? Feel to heal. And it is that. Yeah, we've got to feel it. We've got to feel it. We've got to. I love the idea of a timer. I call it wallow time. I've never set a timer, but you're right. There's a time, isn't there? And I go with it. And yes, songs, smells, things I see, memories pop up, and they hit you, don't they? They come at you from all angles, totally unaware. Sometimes something hits me. When I go past my parents' last home, it wasn't my home, it was their home. I get like a bang in my tummy. I drive past it, and I just go, oh. I know what it is, but actually I pull over, I give myself a moment, I go through it. I have a lot of coping strategies that I'm so grateful for. Breathing, sitting with it, meditation, giving myself time. I've learned tapping. I do tapping with my clients, and it's so valuable to help. If you're not familiar with it, it's tapping on acupuncture points, helps the emotions move. Because what I've learned over the years is the worst thing for me is to hold those emotions tight, which I think is natural. We hold on, don't we? Go, oh, don't like it, don't know what to do. But actually just letting things flow, movement, going for a walk, that kind of thing, crying out loud, sobbing very loudly. It is really therapeutic, isn't it? So all of these things I've learned, and you know me, I always say I learned everything the hard way, and I really did. I went through a lot of pain. I still feel pain, but that's okay. I'm, as I say, I'm brave enough now to go with it. I trust as well that I will come through. Whereas I never used to think, I think, oh my God, if I let myself be sad, I'll stay sad forever. That phrase, if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. But that's not the truth. I used to think it was. So I really think, there's, like you say, there's so much loss. There's a collective grief at the moment. I'm in England. We've just lost our beloved Queen. We've just been through 9/11, that's massive loss, isn't it? So feeling that for everyone else as well, the sadness. I've had two of my very close friends who've just recently lost their mothers. And I've really felt I've supported them best I can. I've been with them. But again, it's that, it hurts. It really hurts, doesn't it? But I do think that's okay. I think you said it, Peggy, didn't you? That, it's the price of love, isn't it? This grief. Because if we didn't love, we wouldn't hurt so much. So it is sort of what it is. But I think as well, it is that kind of just knowing what to do. One of in my Calm Self method, one of my steps, my 6 steps, is actually sitting with difficult emotions. And I use a meditating process through that. And it is actually, if you sit with it, and I think you said it, Gillian, didn't you? It passes. It doesn't last forever. And I think that's, for me, that was a valuable lesson to learn. I'm not going to feel like this forever. But I can feel it. I can really go with it. And yes, it hurts. Physically, it hurts, doesn't it? Sometimes, But as I say, this thing I get in my tummy when I pass my mum and dad's house, I go, oh, that hurts. But it's an unusual sort of pain. And I quite like it now because I'm feeling, I'm human, I'm feeling, I'm loving, I'm caring, I'm sad, I'm everything, And that's what I feel with grief and loss and everything. It's such a mixture of emotions, isn't it? It's never simple. It's never just one thing. And I think what I'd echo is it's okay. I have so many clients come to me. Most people come to me when they've hit crisis, whatever reason it is. A lot of that is when they've lost someone and they've lost their way. And then they will come to me and go, I need to be able to get out of this feeling. I need to change and everything. And I offer them, I call it transformation through relaxation. But it is actually, as I say, sitting with these emotions, giving yourself, as has been said earlier, giving yourself time, not avoiding, being brave, learning the coping strategies, learning what to do, and then we cope better. And I can't pretend it hurts any less, because personally it doesn't for me, but you get braver, you get stronger, and resilient, I think is the term, isn't it? That it can happen, because it's going to keep happening, isn't it? It's just, it's what happens, isn't it? So thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. I think it's a valuable discussion, and I think this will help a lot of other people hearing everybody's stories. So thank you.
Good. Yeah, I really like everything that you shared. And I'm sorry, right, that you're missing your mom and that you're hurting, that there's still pain there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I really, honor you, Nadine, for being so vulnerable and being so open and feeling that you can be here and cry and show your vulnerability, because again, part of our past conditioning and our evolution, we weren't, being vulnerable, crying was
Mm.
perceived as a weakness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, it is the opposite. Is crying and being emotional is actually, being in your emotion, really feeling your emotion.
Yeah.
Even in business, we're here in a business call.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
doing a podcast, right? And so this is not the old guard where let's suck it up and let's get on with it. Been
Yeah.
done that for far too long, right? This is about our medicine. This is
Mm.
about our right as humans. And
Yeah.
that is to feel all of the emotions, again, to feel, to heal what it is that we're able to move beyond the human condition of our past. And grieving is part of what we need to make normal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and talk about it so that we're not hiding in closets, walking around in grief. Because when you're I wanted to make a t-shirt once that said, I'm grieving. And then when I go to the store and the checkout clerk or whatever, and I'm feeling in my grief, I'm in my grief, I've got the t-shirt on, it says I'm grieving. And then the people that read that part right away would have compassion,
Yes. Yeah.
instead of bringing the judge and maybe seeing my emotions on my face, maybe seeing how I'm feeling, right? Because when you're in grief, you're not necessarily smiling. You don't
No.
necessarily want to talk or whatever. You're hurting. And so, we as humans, how do we support each other through our grief? How do we communicate that better than we have in the past? With, like what you said, Jilly, with your parents. And our parents weren't raised that way. That wasn't that part of that time. It
Mm.
wasn't part of the 50s, the 60s to be in our emotional well being and express our emotions, because back then people were still walking around hiding things under the rug. Don't talk to the neighbors, tell everybody what's going on. People were still doing different things like that. So I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of humans.
Mm.
So one of the stories that I wanted to share was, I have a lot of grief stories because I have, had to, in order to heal my emotional body and in order to heal the emotional core wounding of my work, my modality that I moved through in, 2008, all the way, development of how I helped others heal as well. And that is, I have a lot of different stories, but the one story that I was reminded of is my when I lost my dog. So I want to show you guys just a minute. Um, she was with me for like 16 years. This is this is her. Her name is Tuesday, and she was a little poodle Pomeranian, and she was just an adorable, very very smart, very amazing dog. And so when it was time to let her go and put her down, because that's I had to make that decision when that time period came. It was a very challenging time because your dogs are like your children, right? So for me, that was a very challenging choice to make. And people that are close to me in my local community, they knew, I was with my dog 24/7, and we did all kinds of things together. So the uh, the ceremony that I wanted to do with my dog is something that was really, really important to me. Because one thing that I do is I process the grief and dive deeply into it. And I don't like to be rushed. I don't like to be rushed, because when I do this grief work or the processing, it might take me longer than it takes someone else. So the reason I'm bringing this story up is because, I had a friend of mine who said to me, I was driving to the vet to have the dog put down. And then I thought about, what am I going to do afterwards? And I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take myself to go to her favorite spots, the places I used to take her where we would just have so much joy and fun together. I'm going to bring a whole bunch of balloons, and I'm just going to send the balloons up with blessings and love and and I have no idea how long this is going to take me or when I feel like I've had enough of this. So even when my friend said, "Can I go with you to the vet? Can I ride with you?" I declined because I wanted to give myself 100% permission to just be with me and my beloved dog and not feel rushed by a time period of somebody else has to go or there has to be something else that has to be done, because this was about my loss. This was about me. And it doesn't mean that the next day I didn't reach out, my friend didn't reach out to me, but this particular thing was really important to me. And so that was part of honoring my relationship to her and how we loved each other. And so I wanted to share that story with you. All right. Antonina, you are up. Thank you for being here and share with us a story of grief and loss that has affected you and how you have overcome it.
Thank you very much, Cornelia. And it is a very, well, you can tell by my voice that actually I feel happy about this discussion. Thank you very much, Jilly, and welcome to the group, sharing your story. Thank you, Nadine, and thank you, Peggy, about sharing with us the swishing mechanism. I would consider myself a very, very, very private person. I don't like to share everything. I like to analyze, and what I conclude from listening to all of you and comparing and putting through my prism is that there are two types of kind of grief. The one type is brought by the outside, the things that happen outside your body that comes and touch through you. And there are many coping strategies. Jilly mentioned one, Nadine, you mentioned another one, Peggy, you mentioned another one, Cornelia, you shared the lovely mechanism, the lovely strategy of balloons and releasing all these. What Jilly mentioned is allowing for the grief to be accepted, and this is a brilliant strategy. However, there are cultural differences, and me coming from a completely different culture, I keep listening to you that we are brought up to, suck it up and go, but no, there are we can, my point is that we can learn from each other, from the different cultures. Studying a different culture, let's say Australian culture, you can learn a lesson how to cope in a different way from the culture that you were brought up with. And also there is the other grief, the other type of grief, which is brought by the inside. It is brought by your own soul grieving for something that is in you. And using all the wisdoms, I would say, my soul brought to me in this life, I've developed to be grateful, because every grief is a proof that I am rich. I am rich with emotions. And this is the optimistic side of living through grief. But the hardest grief I found in my experience is the one that was brought inside. A very quick story. It was 2014 when my soul rebelled and was hungry. My soul was showing me what I was possibly made up for to come into this life and spread my light and all this. And that grief was the hardest grief. The coping mechanism for me at that time was to sit down with my family, which is my cultural thing, and tell them about this, not with friends, but tell them and ask for help and permission in a way to help me follow the path of my soul. So with me, it is always, it is the grief there. I know you can't deny it. It will be there. The question is, what is it that I can do with it? I can tell the story to other people. I can help other people going through the same. I can connect with other people, join forces. You see, that's my way of direction. And that's the way my brain processes things. It doesn't mean that I'm a robot. I'm not. I feel, but I analyze. And always the question is, what is it that I can do with it? What good I can do with it? So these are my words for you all here and the listeners. And I hope they help someone. So thank you.
What a beautiful, beautiful perspective that you opened up with, how we can learn from each other culturally, which again, in our world at large, there's been so much division going on instead of unity, coming together and learning and growing with each other and helping each other. And this is also part of our evolution now. And it's also part of our growth and our learning, is supporting each other culturally, learning, that we all have different griefs. We all have different things that we're processing, all the different losses, and to be able to have compassion. That's why I still think that I should have a t-shirt that says I'm grieving, because I think that's a fabulous t-shirt to have, that because at any point in time, you might have to be faced with loss. I just, received a message from a very close friend of mine the other day saying she lost her beloved soulmate to a car accident, right? And so much loss were the words that she used. And so this happened even after I said I wanted to do this podcast on grief. And so tapping into, even in the coming days, with whatever it is that we're facing as a humanity, as galactic citizens, as the new humans becoming, whatever it is that we're having to face, grief is part of that process. And to embrace that human ability to grieve and dive into our grief and know that it will pass. The way I look at grief is I look at it like a storm. And Jilly, you talked about the egg timer. So I like to use like 48 hours, like the cycle of the moon, to move through that time period, because I know that if it's through that cycle, it's just really being able to really sit and be fully present with the grief. 48 hours later, I will have moved through that cycle, that emotional cycle of the moon. And so, we all have our processes, because we all have to deal with our own grief. We all have the abilities and capabilities to deal with it. And so that's why we're making this podcast today, to support you, to support anyone that is facing grief, and to understand that it's part of our humanity and you're going to get through it. Any one of these amazing people that spoke today and that you will still meet, they're available for you to reach out to them and talk to them about grief if you want support. So I'm going to call up Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob, have you experienced any loss that you would like to share with us and how do you deal with your grief?
Well, indeed, I have. But I'd like to look at it from a different perspective. About a year and a half ago, I was asked to write an article as a pediatrician. What can you say to someone who lost a child? And as a pediatrician, having shared with families the struggle of losing a child for whether it was a chronic disease or whether it was a tragic accident, I in addition to my own faith journey and going through how could this happen, I came up with 7 things, and I'm sure everyone can come up with their own 7 things. But I think I wanted to share those with you because I think they might be helpful in terms of, in my experience. First one is in terms of what we can do for others if somebody has lost, in this particular situation, lost a child, because everyone will have their own journey to go through the grieving process, as we've already heard. Number 1, just be present. Oftentimes, the best thing to say is nothing, just being present, because families get so much emotional support from folks that are just there, and let them say what they want to say. Don't make it about you. Well, I went through. No, don't make it about you. Let them be. Let them say what they want to say, and don't say empty things like, let me know how I can help.
Yeah.
That's not helpful. Number 2, anticipate guilt. Families oftentimes feel very guilty about the loss of the child. If I had just done this, or if I had listened to the doctor about that, were laments I had heard over time. And it's our job not to comfort them and to try to assuage their guilt, to try to help them through it and acknowledge those feelings. Number 3, do something tangible. Bring meals, show up for support, babysit, do other things that make a difference, that might seem mundane, but are so important to the daily lives that need to continue, that's so important. Send handwritten notes, do emotional and physical support that can tangibly show that you're there. Keep in contact. Number 4, people will need help and support, and oftentimes their calm is a sign that they're doing okay, or we interpret as that they're doing okay. But this is a long-standing issue, and we'll need our continued support. And so as we go through this, from my standpoint, oftentimes,
Dr. Bob, just a moment. Your papers are going over your microphone on your computer.
Okay, sorry. Do I need to repeat anything?
No, I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
We're at number 4.
Okay. And that was number 4, keep in contact. Number 5, encourage support groups or professional help, because folks oftentimes don't know where to turn to, don't know that, don't feel that their family might be the emotional support that they want. And it's my job as a professional to let them know what other opportunities are out there. Number 6, anticipate family dynamic changes. Families, that these sorts of things will shake families to the core. Even stable families will undergo changes, and unstable families it might really shake things up. So again, encourage help and counseling as needed. And number 7 then is help the siblings. Siblings are oftentimes neglected in this. Everyone concentrate on the child and the parents, but the siblings need support and help through this also. So I think there's a lot of dynamics here that we can think through and do and help folks with. And when I look back through this in terms of families that I've dealt with, I didn't do as well as I would have liked to, but continuing to be there and listening is so important. And again, in first year of medical school, I took a psychiatry interviewing class. And that was so important to me because I learned that one of the basic lessons of life is don't just say something, listen. And that is so hard, especially for doctors. But but I think I'm a better listener now.
I love everything you said. It's brilliant. I actually want you to send me that list because I'll put it in the YouTube description so people can have access to it. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, when you said number one, be present. I really feel that is exactly what I did when I was with my friend who lost her son to suicide for the entire family. And while I was there, I was doing exactly that. I wasn't really saying anything. I was just there and I was just present. And that was one of the greatest gifts. And I think that is also a gift with anything, with any form of grief, is just to be present to someone and witness someone and listen. And so that's why, Dr. Bob, uh, please send me that list. I want to put it. I want to put it. I think it's a wonderful perspective the way that you shared that, and very, very helpful. Thank you for that. Okay, Mr. J, welcome to the podcast, and would love to hear your perspective on grief.
Hello, hello. I am Mr. J. You know, a couple things. I think a lot of people first and foremost think that grief has to do with, death or dying or divorce or things like that. But, we also grieve good things. We could grieve graduations. We could grieve even when people get married. I mean, grief is enduring a loss. People grieve after they win the lottery. So I think, it just doesn't have to be related to anything necessarily negative. There's also positive things. Our body experiences anxiety, and our nervous system doesn't know the difference between good anxiety or bad anxiety. Our body just responds. I think one of the main things to do is radical acceptance. So many times, we keep stuck because we will, we even say it. I can't believe this. I can't believe it. I won't believe it. It's not true. It's not. So obviously we need to, go through that experience. We need to have those first initial stages and phases, but radical acceptance is going to start the healing process. And then I just want to say, one of the things that helps the grieving process after radical acceptance is to celebrate the loss, add some type of purpose to your pain. Listen, everybody watching this, listening to this now or in the future has lost significantly. So it's something that we can all relate to, but add some type of purpose to your pain. My father just passed a few years ago. I have a little area in my closet in my bedroom where I go sometimes and I just talk to my dad. And the last thing I want to say is this: all emotions after grief are completely normal, common, and healthy. I remember going to my father's graveyard and the first time, and I was crying. And then I found myself actually getting very angry with him and saying, "I still need you, Dad," and you left. And I became angry. That's all healthy and a part of the grieving process. So anybody that's going through grief, you're not crazy. You're not going crazy. You are just traumatized and going through the grieving process. That's all.
Wow. That was very well said. Excellent, excellent advice. It's so true that, we also grieve, good things. Like I can imagine, people, well, what is it like to win the lottery and grieve a new life with that, right? Because winning the lottery would mean that you now have a new life, and that changes everything. So your physical body again is experiencing those emotions like you said. And so it's really wonderful, Mr. J, that you're out there doing that work and that you're helping people move through their betrayals, and also helping them in their relationships. And so that's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. Julie DeLuca, nice to see you. Julie DeLuca Collins, nice to see you. Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Wonderful. There's some kind of a feedback. Let's see. Nope. Let's try it again. Okay.
Okay, so I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
We happen to be two leading providers here next in front of each other. So that's why you heard some feedback. This is a wonderful conversation, Cornelia. I think that grief is, again, that visitor that we all have come to our door from time to time. And I know that for me, um, losing my dad was definitely probably the largest grief that I've experienced. The other one would be my grandmother. And I remember going back to when I first lost my grandmother, I was 17, and revisiting that, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross book that we all read in college, right? The 5 stages of grief. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm in the denial, I'm in the anger, in, the bargaining, the depression, the acceptance. And I went through that kind of measuring. And when my dad died, I realized that we don't experience that in order. We don't go through and check off each of those things. And the experience is so unique to us when we grieve that we cannot really say to someone, hey, watch out for that, because that's how you're going to start to experience that visitor coming to your door. The other thing that for me, and again, I want to have people that watch this take away that persistent grief and trauma is going to come when we're in this cycle of going through all these emotions of denial, anger, bargaining, and we're just so quick to go from one stage to the next without staying in the moment. And you have been such a great teacher in the sense that you've taught me about anger, and anger certainly is one of those expressions for me that I tend to let visit, and I am quick to want to shift out of that. And it keeps me in that traumatic cycle. But for me, learning and experiencing from your mentoring that it's okay to feel some of that and stay there in that difficult emotion, and that the difficult emotion is like a warning sign that, hey, there's something deeper going on, and really be able to watch it like we watch the clouds, and be open to it's part of the normal experience. And I think that so many of us want to shift from the difficult emotions because we feel that we are the only person that is, oh, what are people going to think? And we begin to try to bargain, oh, I shouldn't do that, or what are people, I shouldn't be crying, I should be over this, or and so many shoulds that we tell ourselves. But ultimately, as humans, we're part of the human experience, we're part of the human race, and allowing ourselves to feel that is so important. And the other piece is that just like we would feel the empathy for other people, let's give ourselves the choice to be empathetic to ourselves, because at times that is the last person that we want to feel grace and empathy toward when we're stuck in a traumatic loop, or that persistent grief cycle that we tend to get trapped on. So those are some of my thoughts individually. And I know that, I keep working through trauma, grace, grief, difficult emotions, but it's part of the process, it's part of my experience. And ultimately, there are going to be things that kind of bubble up from time to time. There are going to be things, there's many times I pick up the phone and I want to call my dad about something exciting. Or I do get to pick up the phone and listen to his voice. 6 years later, I have his voice messages that he used to send to me, and I don't delete them, and I've saved them in several places because I want to be able to have that accessibility. And that's how I process the grief of my relationship with him. And I want others to know that find the way for you to really be present, empathetic to yourself, and not rush through the process of that. I have a brilliant friend, by the way. His name is Seth Elliott Santoro, and he took the 5 stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and he created something that has been super helpful to me also. It's called the SMILE method. And the first thing is SMILE stands for shock, when someone passes or when we experience grief, we're going to have that first instinct to want to protect ourselves and to want to like, oh no, this is happening. And then we entered into the stage in which we have this mock acceptance. We are going to sort of accept it. But you know, the painful event is real and the pain itself is here and we cannot deny it. We need to be open and embrace it and feel that pain. And then we go into the overwhelmdom, where we could become overwhelmed over these things that are new to us. If we've never lost somebody, if we've never experienced loss of a partner, a pet, a friend, or even seeing somebody else that you're close to grieve and lose someone they love, you're going to get in that overwhelm. Like, what do I do? How do I handle this? What do I say? And be okay with, again, those significant emotions that are going to come. And when you're in overwhelm, take a step forward. That's the best way to move past overwhelm, and learn from the experiences. That's the L in the SMILE method, is learn, what is this trying to teach me? Maybe I didn't say the right thing to someone. What can I say differently? How can I do this better? And that's part of a great thing to add to your repertoire and your tools. And last, embrace just overall what you're going through and accept the love that you have for somebody. And that's what is causing you to definitely go through the emotions of not having them here. So those are some of the thoughts that I have. And thank you again, everybody. I appreciate being here.
It's wonderful, wonderful, very, very amazing uh, gifts you shared. And I, again, am reminded of don't rush me. Don't rush my grief. I'm one of those people that I will take my time with it. And however long, you know, it's like when you use the words when someone says, aren't you done with that yet? No, I'm not. I'm not done with it yet. I'm not done until I'm done. So I'm not done until I'm done. And I also love what you said, you know, give it first to yourself, which is exactly how I opened up the meeting today with the boundary to master, to be a master of your mind. There's that one thing that you have to do, because otherwise you're going to not have that boundary in place. And the way that you treat yourself is the way that you treat others. And so I know that the way that I love myself, the way that I care for myself, the way that I heal myself, the way that I nurture myself, there isn't anyone that can really do it as well as I'm doing it for myself, because that's where it all begins. And so that's why it's like really trusting your process, trusting what it is that you're uh, feeling to heal, trusting your process. That's a really great way to go about it. Trust your process, you know, because like you also said, Julie, you know, everybody has to figure out their way. The bottom line with what we're sharing here with all of this is that grief is normal. It's part of our humanity. For many, many years, we used to suppress our grief and loss. And now it's really, really important that we show, and I know you don't like that word when I use that word, model, but be the example, Dr. Bob, I'm referring to the modeling piece. Be the example for other people that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be in our grief. Like you were crying earlier, Nadine, and being so vulnerable and open with what you shared. And so that is all part of our humanity. That's why I wanted to bring this video today, this podcast. That's why I called in the world's best practitioners in the world that are here to help you in, you know, dealing with your grief, even if it's just sharing their own story with how they've overcome grief in their life. So we have a couple of people left that I would like to bring in, and then we're going to close this podcast. Thank you so much for staying present with us all of this time. So this is one of those longer ones that has a lot of wisdom in it. So I'd like to bring to the call now, Pearl Shiranza. Is that how I say your last name? I apologize. I can't hear you. We can't hear you because I don't know, for some reason. It doesn't show that you're muted. Okay. Show rounds. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear now? Can you hear now?
Yep.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me now? Okay. I had the wrong microphone on. I was saying the C's like an S, so it's Sharenza, but you did good, Cornelia. So this has been like very powerful for me. Some of you may or may not know, I just lost my son in July, and Dr. Bob's list was just like, I was keeping notes, and everything he said was exactly what we went through. And it was very traumatic. When we literally were talking to our son 5 minutes before he passed away. And there are many different factors of how we found out. There's all kinds of things that happened that we're grieving that too. Not getting somebody at our door to tell us, finding out in the news that he passed. Those things of all, we're grieving that process. But the one thing we said as a family was that when it was just my husband, myself, and our other son, when we were together, is that no matter what, it's okay to cry in front of all of us. We have to show our emotion. Don't hold it in, because you're not helping me if you hold it in, and you're certainly not helping yourself. So as our many families started to arrive, I mean, we had family coming in from everywhere, and we had the community supporting us and lifting us. We told all of them in our presence, don't not cry because you're worried about how we would react. We need you to show those emotions because we need to feel those emotions with you. So that's been really, really important. And, I tell everybody, I've told Julie, I've told all my friends, everybody's like, you're so strong. I mean, I'm here doing a retreat right now for 13 women, including Julie and I. And, people are like, are you still doing your retreat? You're still going. I went to Syracuse and got the city named after me. I'm still doing those things. And my reason for that is when my son Matthew was alive, he used to say to me, you saw the glass half full, Mom. He saw many things come my way, be throwing darts at me, and I never let it keep me back. And I used to say to him, I don't see it half full, I see it full, because if I'm half full, I'm not taking care of me. If I'm full, I'm taking care of me. And then I want it overflowing so I can take care of others. Right. So I feel that I can't change that about my life because I've lost him. Right. I need to honor him, to show him that I still, even though he's not here, I'm still doing what he saw me do. And, I want people to understand that that's just how I want to, I want to honor him. There's been many signs, that he's been around me. There's been amazing things that have happened. There's been, him showing up in dreams. I was at Julie's house and he showed up in a dreams, to me. And so those things, I let those come. The hardest part is at night when I go to sleep. But I think it was Peggy who said that when something comes that's, brings me that grief, that wave, just like Julie said, I let that wave come in because it's going to knock me anyways, right? So I need to honor that wave. But I've given myself, Peggy, the same thing of honoring what's that great memory. We had great sushi conversations. I took him to college. We were dancing in a grocery store to a favorite song that came on in the grocery store, right? So those memories I bring forward. Dr. Bob, what you said about the siblings, he has a younger sibling, my almost 23-year-old. I'm always calling him, where are you? I'm honoring, how are you feeling about the emotions? Going and talking to somebody professionally. I was just before I left to come here, I just went and saw my therapist and sat with her, who was his therapist, who took the loss very hard herself. So we've kind of also supporting one another. So everything we've said here, I totally agree with. Walking through this grief, I find it, we were talking the other day in the car, when you buy a new car, you see all your car everywhere, right? You see, oh, there's my car, there's my color. Never wanted to be in the family that I can see, and I know many people now who have lost their child, their daughter, whatever that is. And so I'm doing things back home to start supporting those other, because I've had such support. But like, I forget who said it here, but it's a new world of living. It's a new world of living without him, but also honoring him. And still I need to move forward, because if I don't move forward, then I might as well have gone with them. And that's not something I want. So I'm glad you're doing this episode today. There's been so much. I took notes and mental things that I've put in my head too. So Cornelia, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, it's, such an honor. I know when Julie phoned me to tell me that you lost your son, I was like, oh my God. just right away, it brought back my two ladies last year that lost their sons to, suicide. I know with your son, I think it was an accident that happened, a car accident. But that's why I reached out to you and told you that you need a support community around you right away that's going to help you with whatever it is that you need. And because this is just unimaginable, uh, to be able to deal with this. But I have to say, Pearl, you are a powerhouse, because seeing you go through this process and walking, with yourself and being supported with your community has just been amazing to witness you. So you're being a wonderful model, a wonderful role model example for others to see how to deal with something that is so devastating. It's so devastating for all of us, is to just imagine when you lose a child. It doesn't matter how old the child is, but the loss of that. So I honor you, and I always think about you and continue to send you love and healing as you go through this time of grief. So thanks, Pearl. Okay, welcome, Susan. You are our final person coming in. It's nice to see you today. I know that you have an incredible share, so look forward to hearing what it is that you're going to share.
Thank you so much. And Cornelia, as always, you're on the pulse of what is needed today. I want to just share one brief tool or tip or strategy that my best friend Debbie shared with me, although when she shared it with me, I hadn't had need to apply it since that time. I have. And that is grief visits. Grief visits. Debbie lost her father when she was in her late 20s, I believe, and I never met him. And so she had a long experience with that. I've had several losses myself just in the last few years. And this idea that grief visits, a visit begins and it ends. And so I've been taking some notes. It's as long as I need it to be. Somebody talked about anger. It's okay. Pearl's reminding us to keep the emotion involved with the story. It's okay. And I learned that grief visits. And when grief visits me, I have my mother's hats hanging on the back of my door. Grief visits occasionally when I see the hats, then I see it as a visit and I do honor the visit. I, clean house for the visit and then the visit ends. And so I hope that this idea will be helpful. I shared it with my own mother at age 84 a few years ago. And she said, I never thought about it in that way, but she said, that's so helpful to me. And I've never forgotten that either. So grief visits, and you can say hello, and you can be in it, and then you can know that visits also end. Thank you, Cornelia.
Oh, wow, I've never heard of grief visits. First thing I'm thinking about is a t-shirt. Again, there's that t-shirt, I am grieving, grief visits. Just again, letting the people in your surroundings know that you're grieving, and that you're sharing that with people, and how that is all part of our healing, because we heal through being open, being vulnerable, sharing our stories, and for each person to find their way back home. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to this incredible podcast. So when you see this on YouTube, we would love for you to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube. And also, those of you that have given voice to grief today, I would love for you to put a comment underneath the video, and also possibly put your the tools, 1, 2, 3. Just, it's nice for people to be able to see it and read it. And we're going to be making this the featured podcast in the KS Media Group app. Be sure to download the KS Media Group app and check out our beloved homepage, where 10 minutes a day, 7 days a week, you have access to all these amazing people that spoke here today. So thank you so much for listening and tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to the Cornelia Stephanie Show, Wake Up to Love, your call to action. Tune in each week on Transformation Talk Radio. Cornelia's joy is to engage others in practical ways, showing us how to live in the new earth in harmony with our true nature. For more information on Cornelia and her extraordinary work, or to listen to past shows, go to her website at corneliastephanie.com.